300 square meters. 10 families. Not a single nail. What you're looking at shouldn't be possible by modern standards, a home built entirely by hand, held together by nothing but trees, vines, and knowledge that predates written history. The Sakuddei people have been constructing these structures deep in the rainforests of Siberut Island for millennia. And the techniques they use? They might just expose how much we've forgotten. This is where we bridge two worlds, ancient wisdom and modern questions. Here, we dive into how indigenous cultures solve the kinds of problems we throw technology at without thinking twice. Today, we're heading into the heart of Siberut's rainforest to understand something remarkable: how the Sakuddei build homes that shelter entire extended families, bend with earthquakes instead of breaking, and stand for generations, without a single piece of metal. Siberut is the northernmost island in Indonesia's Mentawai chain, sitting 130 kilometers off Sumatra's coast. The Sakuddei are one of at least 11 ethnic groups there, living in the south-central interior where jungle meets isolation. Theirs is an egalitarian society, no chiefs, no hierarchy, no warfare. Just families who've learned to live with the forest instead of against it. Their homes, called rumah, are the physical manifestation of that philosophy. These longhouses are rectangular, with verandas at both ends. Some stretch to 300 square meters, larger than your average American suburban home. They're raised on stilts, traditionally windowless, with interior spaces divided by partitions that still allow families to interconnect. Because that's the point, connection. The Mentawai don't cluster into villages the way we do. Instead, up to 10 patrilineal families might share a single communal house. The umas sit on riverbanks deep in the island's interior, positioned where the rivers are still just creeks threading through forest. Each longhouse is separated from the next by at least a few hundred meters, creating these small family archipelagos scattered through the jungle. And here's what stops most people in their tracks: the uma is built using nothing but what the forest provides. First comes tree selection. The planks are hewn from katuka and kakadut, hardwood so dense they resist rot, so strong they can bear weight for decades. But felling them without power tools isn't a matter of convenience. It demands coordination, tools edged with stone, and sometimes days of labor to bring down and transport a single tree. Bamboo grows more generously. The rainforest offers it in abundance, and it shoots up fast. The Sakuddei weave bamboo strips into walls, lightweight panels that flex with humidity, expanding and contracting as the air changes. It's not just practical. It's responsive. The roof demands sago palm fronds, whole fronds, complete. The sago palm is central to Sakuddei life. Its flower feeds them, its fronds shelter them. Wooden knee frames secure these fronds in place, preventing water from seeping through, especially at the gable where angles meet and rain wants to pool. And then there's rattan. This climbing palm produces long, flexible vines that, when properly prepared, are stronger than rope. Rattan binds the wooden planks together, creating joints that can move without snapping. Here's a thought: if you had to build a house using only what grows within a few miles of where you live, what would you even use? Drop it in the comments. The uma rises on piles, massive wooden posts driven into the ground or resting on stone bases. This isn't aesthetics. It's survival. First, it protects against flooding. Umas are built on riverbanks where seasonal rains can turn gentle creeks into surging currents. Stilts keep the living space above the water. Second, it keeps out the things that crawl and slither. Snakes, rodents, insects, they can't easily scale smooth wooden posts the way they could invade a ground-level structure. Third, and this is where it gets brilliant, it allows the entire structure to move. When the ground shifts from rain, erosion, or seismic activity, the posts absorb that movement without transferring the stress upward into the house. This is the earthquake resistance I mentioned earlier. Without rigid concrete foundations anchoring it in place, the home essentially floats, flexing with natural forces instead of fighting them. Think about what you're seeing here. A massive frame held together entirely by vines. No bolts. No welding. No adhesive. Just organic materials that, when combined with knowledge, create something stronger than most modern homes. But the frame is only the skeleton. Next comes the floor, and this is where precision becomes everything. The floor is made from split wood planks, each one shaped to fit snugly against the next. There are no tongue and groove joints like modern flooring. These planks simply rest side by side. But they're cut so precisely that the gaps are minimal. This allows air to circulate, critical in rainforest humidity, while still providing a solid surface underfoot. Inside, partitions separate the dwelling spaces. These aren't load-bearing walls. They're dividers, creating privacy for different families without isolating them completely. The walls are made by weaving bamboo strips together, time-consuming work that results in panels that are lightweight, breathable, and surprisingly tough. And here's what's remarkable: the bamboo weave isn't just functional. It's beautiful. You might be wondering about privacy. The insides have interconnecting areas, so while families have their own defined spaces, the UMA functions as communal living. Privacy in the Western sense isn't the goal. Community is. So we've walked through the entire process. Trees to posts. Posts to frame. Frame to floors and walls. Walls to roof. All without electricity. All without metal. The result, a home that can shelter dozens of people, withstand monsoons, flex during earthquakes, and stand for generations. But here's what really makes you stop and think: this isn't primitive technology. It's sophisticated engineering disguised as simplicity. Modern construction uses concrete, steel, power tools, cranes, and teams of specialists. We can build faster and taller than the Sakuddei ever could. But we've also created buildings that demand constant maintenance, climate control, and materials that leave scars on the environment. The UMA, by contrast, is almost entirely sustainable. When it eventually decays, it returns to the earth without leaving toxins behind. The skills required to build it pass down through generations, creating cultural continuity that doesn't break. There's also something profound about community-based construction. Building an UMA requires cooperation. No one can do it alone. Everyone contributes according to their strength and skill. Elders provide knowledge. Younger adults provide muscle. Children learn by watching. It's education, social bonding, and practical work happening simultaneously. Compare that to modern construction, where you hire contractors and never touch the work yourself. We've gained convenience. But we've also lost something: self-reliance and communal purpose. I'm not suggesting we all abandon modern housing and move into longhouses. But maybe there's a middle ground. Maybe there are techniques from traditional building, using local materials, designing for climate instead of against it, building with flexibility rather than rigidity, that deserve another look in modern design. What do you think? Could traditional methods teach us something about sustainable architecture? Drop it in the comments. The Sakuddei were forced to abandon their traditional way of life through government intervention in the 1950s and 60s. Indonesian authorities relocated many indigenous groups, pushing them toward modern villages and discouraging practices they considered backward. The UMA longhouses fell into disuse. Since then, there have been efforts to re-establish them in their former settlements. There's growing recognition that indigenous knowledge systems, including traditional architecture, hold value worth preserving. Today, some Sakuddei families have returned to building UMAs, though often with modern adaptations. You might see corrugated metal roofs alongside traditional thatch, or window openings cut where there were none before. It's a hybrid approach, blending old wisdom with new materials. But the core techniques persist: building on stilts, using rattan binding, weaving bamboo walls. They persist because they work. Because they're adapted to the environment. Because they make sense. And that's the real lesson. The Sakuddei didn't build this way because they lacked access to modern tools. They built this way because this method was perfectly suited to their environment, their materials, and their social structure. It's not about being primitive or advanced. It's about being appropriate. We've gone from rainforest to rooftop, exploring how the Sakuddei build homes without power or nails. We've seen how they select materials, construct foundations, weave walls, and thatch roofs, all using techniques refined over thousands of years. These aren't museum pieces. They're living traditions, still practiced by people who understand that sometimes the old ways are also the smart ways. In a world obsessed with the next innovation, the Sakuddei remind us that solutions don't always have to be new to be effective. If this resonated with you, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our next exploration into indigenous wisdom. We're covering cultures from every corner of the planet, learning how people solve problems with ingenuity instead of technology. Here's something to consider: look around your own home. How much of it could you repair or rebuild yourself if you had to? And what would you need to learn to become more self-sufficient? Drop a comment telling me what indigenous culture you want us to explore next. And share this with someone who appreciates craftsmanship and traditional knowledge.